Hello there, and welcome to Speaking of Our Words, radio programming that brings you the wide range of voices, stories, and forms of local writers, and offering you some insight into their creative process. My name is Chris Dequire. I teach creative writing workshops at Columbia College Chicago, and I will be your host. And we have several guests in the studio today, so why don't we kick it off with a piece by regular contributor Richard Bell, who, as usual, is not here today. So I will be reading his piece called Groundhog Day 2. One of my favorite movies is Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, where he lives the same day over and over again. But what if the groundhog had to live the same thing over and over? It might go like this. Phil the groundhog is sitting in a cage inside a dark tree stump, waiting to be pulled out to check if he sees his shadow. If he sees it, 6 more weeks of winter. They tap on the door, open it, and lift him out, and it's a sunny day. Phil doesn't care either way. He just wants a snack and a nap. As the announcer is talking to the crowd, Phil suddenly finds himself back inside his cage, in the dark. Moments later, there is a tap on the door, and he is pulled out. He looks around thinking, "Didn't we just do this? Maybe I imagined it. No big deal." The announcer starts with his speech, but then Phil is back in the dark again. There is a knock at the door, a hand reaches in, and he resists and now has to be dragged out. He starts squirming to get away, but is held tightly. A few minutes later, he's back in the dark. There is a knock at the door, and Phil poops all over his cage, which makes the announcer angry as he pulls him out with his little feet all dirty. Again, back in the dark. Again, the door opens, and now Phil shoots out and tries to run away, but is caught by several spectators and handed up onto the platform. He has a crazy gleam in his eyes now. What is happening? Before he can think of an answer, he is inside again. Once more, there is a knock and a hand reaches in, but this time he bites it. A minute later, 2 hands with thick gloves come in and yank him out. He is held up for the crowd to see, and he is snarling. A few minutes later, back in the dark, over and over, hundreds of times. Now he tries biting his wrists to end it all, and once more is pulled out, but he's bleeding. Someone comes over with bandages and wraps his arms up, but after a few minutes, he is back in the cage again with absolutely no injuries. Finally, Phil decides to just go with the flow, be good, and accept that he cannot change his fate. He comes out smiling and happy and participates in the show. After a few more times, he stops reappearing inside the cage, and time goes on. Hooray! Back to normal. As he's relaxing, one of the weather announcers from the crowd walks up and grabs Phil, rushes to a stolen pickup truck, and speeds off toward the cliff at the rock quarry. All right, thank you, Richard Bell. And our next reader is going to be Walter Gascoigne. Hello, Walter.
Hi, Chris.
Walter, what do you have for us today?
It's a story that our tens of listeners will remember, I hope. Addie and the Cats. I did chapter 1, and I read chapter 1 and chapter 2, but I've been spacing these a year apart because it's based on my granddaughter and my 2 cats.
Oh, yes.
And I figure if I write just 1 chapter a year, I'll be able to make a book out of it in about 13 years from now. So.
All right. Well, Walter Gascoigne, take it away.
Okay, a quick synopsis from the first 2 chapters. Addie's a 1-year-old whose parents went to the movies and left the big cat in charge. There's big one and little one. Big one is they're both females. Big one's a tiger striped cat, and it has an attitude, and little one's just a little frisky calico. And they find a crack in the basement wall and go exploring. And the first chapter, they save the mice and start their union from the rat that's being their slave labor master. And then the second chapter, they rescue the mechanical babies from the centipede that's forcing them to make gloves and boots. And this is the third chapter. Addie and the Cats, Chapter 3, The Silver Bells. Stories often use sound to enhance the reader's perception of what is occurring during certain times when describing something just isn't enough. Sounds can be soothing, like a waterfall or rain on a tin roof. Sounds can also be alarming, like the screech of a cat late at night or the sound of nails on a chalkboard. The sounds that Addie and her companions were about to hear were both soothing and alarming at the same time. Imagine the sound of breaking glass mixed with church bells, and you may begin to understand just what the sound was that made Big One's fur bristle as she walked cautiously down the dark corridor with her friends. What she didn't know was that sometimes good sounds can be a bad thing, just like bad sounds can sometimes turn out to be something good. Meow, hissed Big One, which in cat speak meant, "We have gone far enough. It is time to turn around and go back home before your parents arrive." "Free do la lee," Addie said in baby speak, so their new mechanical friend would understand them. She said, "We haven't been gone all that long. I'm sure we have plenty of time before Mom and Dad get back from the movies. Besides, don't you want to find out what is making that noise?" Before Big One could answer, Little One chirped in, "Meow, meow, meow, meow," which meant, "Yes, let's go see what's making that sound." Little One quickened her pace. The mechanical baby looked towards Addie. His flickering green eyes lit the dark corridor in an eerie green glow. Addie grabbed his metal hand and hurried to catch up with Little One. Big One shook her head and followed cautiously behind them, looking over her shoulder every once in a while to make sure that nothing surprised them from the rear. The quartet of adventurers had been hearing a strange tinkling sound soon after freeing the mechanical babies. As they slowly made their way down the dark tunnel, the chiming grew louder and louder, till it sounded like church bells on a Sunday afternoon. "We must be getting close," said Addie in adult speak. She was correct, for very soon they came to an entrance that was blocked by what appeared to be chicken wire, which stretched across the entire passage, barring their way. "Looks like we'll have to turn around and go home," said Big One as she began to turn around. "No, wait," said Addie. "Six? Do you think you can break through that wire?" "I am positive that it can be accomplished." The mechanical baby's eyes glowed brighter, and sparks jumped between the wires protruding from his head. With the strength of 20 babies, Six grasped the wire and began pulling. With little effort, he pried it loose, and the quartet continued cautiously on their way. The corridor opened up into a large area covered with straw. Several wooden crates lined the walls, and on the left wall stood an enormous stove with several pots and pans on top. In the middle of the room was a large well, with a rope and a bucket lying next to it for drawing water. On the wall directly across from where the companions entered was another door. This one was not made of wire, but was built from iron. It had no handle on the outside, only a small window near the top from which light streamed through. The sound which drew the companions here was coming from the dozen or so chickens that moved furiously about the place. Each one had a large silver bell tied around their neck, so that with every movement the hens made, the bells tinkle and jingle. The bells were so loud that none of the chickens heard the wire being ripped from the door. They were moving about with such fervor that Addie and her companions went unnoticed until one of the chickens bumped right into the large tiger-striped cat. "Excuse me," said the hen in almost perfect adult speak. She was in such a hurry that she didn't notice it was the cat she had ran into until Addie spoke. "Pardon me, ma'am, but I was wondering, why are all of you wearing bells?" Addie inquired. The chicken looked up, and noticing the strangers for the first time, she threw her wings in the air and, in a shrill voice, demanded to know what they were doing here. "My friends and I are exploring the tunnels when we heard the sound of your bells and came to investigate," Addie said with a smile. Both Little One and Six nodded their heads in agreement, while Big One just shook her head and sighed. "Well, you can't be here. Do you want us to go into the oven if you're caught talking to me? Can't you see we're busy?" The hen's actions became more frenzied, and she began to peck on the mechanical baby's feet, making a hollow ping, ping, ping sound. Several of the other chickens stopped what they were doing and advanced towards the travelers, their bells jingling with each movement. Little One crouched down, her calico coat bristling. She was ready to pounce if the chickens tried to harm Addie in any way. "Meow," Addie said in cat speak, so the chickens wouldn't understand what she was saying, which meant, "It's okay, Little One. Let's just see what they want." Addie stroked the young one's fur, trying to keep her calm. "Babs, what in the coop is going on over here? Who are these strangers?" asked the largest of the hens that were now encircling the explorers. Babs stopped pecking at Six's feet and turned towards Addie. "You heard Rosie. Who are you, and what are you doing here?" she barked. "As I was saying before you started pecking my friend, we are explorers and we heard strange tinkling noises, so we came to see what was causing them. My name is Addie, and this is Big One, Little One, and Six. she said as she pointed to each of her friends, who nodded politely when their names were called. Normally I would say it's a pleasure to meet you, but if you're caught here, it will be the oven for us, so please just go away, Babs said. Babs is right. You mustn't stay here, whispered Rosie. It will mean the death of us all. Before Addie or any of the others could speak, there came a loud shriek from the door on the other side of their room. Why is it so quiet out there? I don't hear the bells, so I know you must be slacking off again. You had better get to work and bring me my omelet before I decide to have chicken legs for dinner. All of the chickens scrambled about everywhere, preparing dinner for whatever was behind the door, leaving Addie and her companion standing alone in the middle of the room, wondering what to do next. The sound of the bells growing louder as the hens moved about at a brisk pace. Well, that settles it. Let's get going back home, Big One demanded. No, wait, there's something wrong here, and I intend to find out what it is. Before her friends could stop her, Addie walked over to the iron door and peered in through the open window. It was dark, except for a single candle that sat on a nightstand. Next to the nightstand was a large recliner. Sitting in the recliner, smoking a cigarette, was the largest weasel Addie had ever seen. It wore a green vest that was many sizes too small for its large body, and on its face sat a pair of sunglasses so dark that it was impossible to see its eyes. Addie came back to the group to tell them what she saw. They all agreed to try and talk to Babs and Rosie one more time. Quickly they hurried over to the stove where the hens were preparing the omelet and began to question them for information. Who is that weasel in the other room, and why do you have to prepare his dinner? Addie asked. Rosie stopped what she was doing and nervously told Addie how the hens had come to such a miserable existence. It all started out fine in the beginning, back before we let Esquire W. take charge. Originally, we hired him as a consultant for our egg production facility. After the egg beater accident, he wasn't the same weasel. Without his eyesight, he expected us to do everything for him. We obliged him at first, us feeling sorry for the poor thing and all, but slowly he began to demand more and more of us. Before we knew it, he had these silver bells around our necks. It was his way of keeping track of us since he no longer had eyes. He knew our every movement from that moment on. When Henrietta, the poor dear, started complaining that he should do his fair share of work as well, he became so furious that he strangled her with her own bells. I don't care to discuss what happened after that, but if you look closely at the chair he sits in, you will see chicken feathers that are being used for stuffing. Rosie looked over at Babs, and they both shuddered at the thought of it. How horrible, Addie exclaimed. Let me at him, hissed Little One. Wait, Addie said, holding on to Little One. I have a better plan than attacking him head on, but I will need the help of all the chickens. In the meantime, keep going about what you're doing so the bells don't go silent. We will do as you say, Addie, child. Whatever help you need from us, we will give. I will spread the word to the other hens. Just tell us what we need to do. Both Rosie and Babs spoke at the same time. Okay, here's the plan, Addie whispered as the group leaned their heads in to hear what Addie had in mind. Esquire W. was enjoying his cigarette and wondering what was taking dinner so long when all at once the bells went silent. What's going on out there? I warned you that you'd better get back to work once. I will not tolerate this behavior. He listened for the chiming bells, but there was none to be heard. Angrily got off his recliner, stamping his cigarette to the floor, and grabbing his walking stick, said, You had better be working on my dinner. By the time I get through this door, I will pluck every one of you. When he burst through the door, Addie yelled, Now! Somewhere near Esquire W.'s left came the sound of bells. As fast as his large frame let him, he turned towards his left and swung his walking stick. Missed me, Little One. You have to be faster than that. You're next, Six, shouted Addie. From behind the giant weasel came the sound of more bells, and he turned hastily around and stumbled towards the tinkling noises. I'll get you. Then you'll pay for deceiving me, Esquire W. shrieked as he groped his way forward, walking stick swinging wildly in front of him. Missed me, the mechanical baby said in a metallic voice. Your turn, Big One, Addie shouted. More bells came from the weasel's right side this time, and he turned once more and charged in that direction, shouting, This behavior is intolerable. Waving his stick and running as fast as he could, Esquire W. could not see what lay in front of him, and fell headlong into the well, making a mighty splash as he hit the bottom. Big One peered down the opening of the well and said with a grin, Let's play chicken again sometime. That was fun. All the hens came out of hiding and began to congratulate the heroes for being so brave and saving them from Esquire W. They tickled Big One with their feathers until she laughed. That's the first time I ever heard you laugh, Big One, Addie said. I laugh all the time, said Big One. You just don't see me doing it. Meow, meow, said Little One, which meant, then you must do it while we're sleeping, because I know I've never seen you laugh before. Sounds of splashing and shouting could be heard coming from the bottom of the well. Addie asked what the hens intended to do with Esquire W. now that they were back in control. I think we'll leave him down there for the night. He needs to learn a lesson. Besides, he's been running us so ragged we haven't slept in weeks, Rosie said. We'll rest up for the night and decide his fate in the morning. Hope he's a good swimmer, said Babs, as she and the others threw their bells into the well, one by one. Meanwhile, back down the corridor from where Addie and her friends came, a large rat was freeing a giant centipede that was tied up by using his claws and teeth to cut through the rope. Well, that's that then. Let's go home, Big One said. Before anyone could answer, Babs told him of a secret door in Esquire W.'s room that led to another passage. She didn't know where it went, but she knew it must lead somewhere because that was how the weasel was able to get his cigarettes. Awesome, shouted Addie and Little One at the same time. Let's go, Addie said, grabbing Six by the hand and tugging him towards the entrance to Esquire W.'s chamber. Little One was already ahead of her. Big One just shook her head, waved goodbye to the hens, and followed behind her friends.
All right, Walter Gascoigne, thank you very much. Look forward to Chapter 4 next January. All right, very good. All right, you are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is TJ Morris. TJ, hello there.
Hi, how you doing, Chris?
Good, TJ. Nice to see you back. Haven't seen you here in a while.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, excellent. Well, what do you have for us today?
Okay, today I have a excerpt from my sequel that I'm beginning for my book Blood is Thicker Than Color, which came out in October of 2014. It's historical fiction, and it's based on a story about my grandfather and how he got in trouble in Mississippi and ran to Chicago. And anyway, I'm starting to write this sequel now. People want to know what else happened to Grandpa.
Oh, excellent. So, very good.
Anyway, here we go.
All right, take it away.
It was the best Brewer clan feast yet. This family reunion was being held at the Brewer family home in Black Hawk, Mississippi. Of course, Bertha and John Allen were there, along with all the children and many grandchildren. All Jack's siblings were present: Annie, Fletcher, James, Shed Hill, DeWitt, and his stepbrother Norman. Paul, Mary, baby girl, and Jake had come down from Chicago, and Jack was the gentleman of the day. It was May 1931, and the sun was starting to set. The air was a little muggy, which signaled that it was going to be a hot Mississippi summer. The men were out in the back of the house. James had roasted 2 pigs and could be seen at a distance, chopping up one of the pigs on a wooden table. The Brewer women were inside the home preparing side dishes. Norman and Jack were seated together on a wooden bench. They seemed to be getting caught up on lost time. Paul was smoking a cigarette as he polished his harmonica. Jake was sitting on the bottom of an oversized wash tub in close proximity to Paul. The aroma of the peach cobbler in the oven had seeped outside. Jake barked out, "Smell like Annie done whipped up one of those peach pies she be making. Sure do smell good," as he continued whittling. They were seated in a circular fashion with John Allen Brewer sitting in a rocking chair. Papa Brewer took a deep breath, absorbing the scent of the cobbler. A smile popped on his face as he gazed around the yard. Jack's brother, Shed Hill and DeWitt, were rolling a barrel of John Allen's finest hooch out of the barn. Shed Hill was the 5th born of the 11 children. He was very fair-skinned, just like many of his siblings, thin and somewhat on the short side. DeWitt was right below Shed Hill in age, which made him youngin' number 6 of the 11 children. DeWitt was light-skinned also, but his pigmentation a little more tan than Jack's, Fletcher's, or Shed Hill's. He was taller than Jack and Shed Hill, but close to height with Fletcher. He also had some thickness to his body like Jack. At this moment, Papa Brewer looked around the yard and considered himself the richest man in Mississippi. He loved his children and hadn't had all of them at the family home in years. He was a proud man with no regrets. There were several grandchildren scattering inside and outside of the house. James had 2 young'uns named James Jr. and Monroe. Ella was 18, 19 years old now, and she had stayed back in Chicago. There were plenty of young'uns to keep the noise level at all-time high. Norman asked Jack, "What you pondering on? You gonna keep hanging around here?" Thinking about going back up north, seeing that Sheriff Rogers when I went into town. He wasn't too happy to see me. Don't think there's much around this here place for me. Don't get to see my young'uns much, and just too many spoiled memories. Baby girl said I can come and stay with her for a while till I can find some work. I'm hoping to get back on at one of the steel mills. Norman responded back, "Things pretty hard all over. They say we's having a depression. I was in Jackson a couple of weeks ago, picked up a newspaper while I was there. They calling it the Great Depression. Things ain't been good for over a year now. That their stock market crashed right after yous went away and crop prices down. They saying this here depression done spread all over the world. I's probably going back up north. The white folks around here wish they had killed me. I's got to be honest. I's need to start over. I's can't do that around here." Jack removed his hat from his head and placed it on his knee. He looked around the yard and out into the fields. He took a deep sigh as he thought about the past and his present situation. Jack was grateful for family, and especially the ex-governor Earl Leroy Brewer. He had heard about what Earl Leroy had done for him. This was another reason it was so hard to stay in Carroll County or any parts of Mississippi. Shed Hill and DeWitt had found some empty preserve jars. They were serving hooch in them. Jack took a sip of his papa's hooch. This was the first hooch he had had since he got out. Papa Brewer made some of the finest hooch in Carroll County. Jack drank, smelt, and looked at his jar of hooch. It seemed like Christmas time. It was just spring. Norman had gone over to see if James needed help chopping up the pigs. Paul was sitting across the way from Jack. He had finished polishing his harmonica. Paul had started to play a few notes. Jack patted his foot a little bit. There was nothing like the sound of a good harmonica. Paul's playing took Jack back to Chicago and Mary's house, but it also brought back memories of Betsy, the twins, and Earl. Jack had another boy now named Lewis. Betsy was knocked up when Jack went away. Jack finally got one that looked like him. Lewis was a spitting image of Jack. He wasn't quite as light-skinned as Jack, but he was close enough. He also had Jack's features. The women started bringing the victuals out of the house. There was a second table close to where James and Norma were tending to the pigs. They placed all the victuals on the table as they made numerous trips back and forth into the house. Jake had started a crap game on top of the slab of wood that was thrown on the ground. He was playing craps with Fletcher and Shed Hill. This celebration was starting to liven up. Jack walked over to his papa. He stood over Papa Brewer looking down into his light brown-colored piercing eyes. John Allen looked up at Jack and smiled. He was just glad that his boy was still alive and in good physical condition. Jack looked at his papa and said, "Thanks, Papa. Eyes didn't mean to cause so much beef for the family. John Allen didn't say a word. He just looked up at Jack and smiled. Baby girl and Mary had started dishing up food. They had prepared macaroni and cheese, collard greens, black-eyed peas, potato salad, peach cobbler, and of course, one of Jack's favorites, bread pudding with raisins. Everyone was seated in the yard, holding plates, bowls, and saucers. DeWitt was getting seconds on the hooch as Mary sat down to rest and smoke a cigarette. Jack's sister Annie started checking to see if anyone needed anything else. Baby girl came and stood by Mary. She stated, "I was trying to get Jack to come back up to Chicago." Mary responded, "This be the best thing. Ain't nothing left in Mississippi for Jack. He may as well come on back up north. I was told him that I got my own place now. He can stay with me for a while. I was hoping Jack decided to come on back. He ain't gonna be happy here in Mississippi. I know he want to stay around here and help Papa, but he's best get on back up north." Annie walked over. Annie was tiny, with a sand complexion and a face full of freckles. "It sure is good to see everybody. I ain't seen Fletcher in about 3 years. Sometimes I really miss Jerusalem and Earl. I come over here and just sit and rock in a chair. I just think about how Jerusalem and I used to play straws all the time. I remember when she got her first gentleman caller. Papa about scared the boy to death." Mary and baby girl giggled. You could tell baby girl was starting to get nervous about Jack. She had started playing with the curls in her hair. She played in her hair and with her fingers whenever she was upset about something.
All right, TJ Morris, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is Dave Gourdoux. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Chris.
Dave, what do you have for us today?
Kind of a personal memoir essay thing that I posted on my blog about a week or two ago. I kind of liked.
All right, very good. I know your voice is bothering you today, so I'll be reading your piece.
Excellent.
For you. All right, it's called Guitar Hero. Opens with a quote from Pete Townsend. "I've got a Gibson without a case, but I can't get that even tanned look on my face. Ill-fitting clothes, I just blend in the crowd. Fingers so clumsy, voice too loud." When I was 13 years old, after flirting with AM Top 40 radio for a few years, I fell deeply in love with hard rock. There was no such thing as classic rock at the time. It was 1972, and rock was still in its infancy, and there was no nostalgic sentimentality attached to it by desperate, middle-aged, pear-shaped men hanging on to their youth by a strand of their combed-over hair. That would all come later. In 1972, hard rock was still a young man's domain, a teenage wasteland. Its soundtrack, the album-oriented FM radio music dominated by the churning chords and screaming riffs of electric guitars. I was physically small and socially inept, painfully shy around girls. Every day I'd wake up in the early morning darkness of my room and wait for the ass-kicking that puberty would subject my ego to. I remember being disappointed when my voice began to crackle and pop before the long-awaited appearance of peach fuzz on my chin and my gonads. It was a confusing time, as my older brother Don, who'd been my roommate for as long as I could remember, got married and moved out of the house. He gave me, as a parting gift, probably the best and most used gift I've ever received, a poster of Raquel Welch from the movie 1 Million Years B.C., that would hang on my bedroom door for about the next 3 years. Needless to say, the poster turned out to be much preferred to the presence of my brother. It was a lonely time, a time when the persistent perception of myself as a misfit was proven to be true. Friends who were more socially adept were suddenly unavailable, spending time at parties and high school dances that I didn't give even the first thought to attending. A significant amount of time was spent in my room, listening to music, spent in my mind, in my fantasies. And it wasn't just Raquel either. In my fantasy world, I was strong and confident and funny, and as my album collection grew, so did my rock and roll fantasy grow. Where do you get those blue jeans, faded, patched secrets so tight? Where do you get that walk oh so lean, your shirt and your shoes just right? I developed secret crushes on countless girls, all beautiful, all popular, even though I was acutely aware that I had no chance with any of them. No chance now, that is, none until I learned to play electric guitar. I became obsessed with the electric guitar. I'd listen for hours to the licks and riffs laid down by Hendrix, Clapton, and Page. I became a fan of David Gilmour's sound and Pete Townshend's stage theatrics. I studied the photos and the album liners, how each player held the guitar, strapped low and loose, and the intensity that oozed out of their pores whenever they played a hot solo. I remember watching the documentary Monterey Pop about the 1967 Monterey Pop Festival. The Who closed out their set with My Generation, ending it with Townshend destroying his guitar in what was the perfect articulation of the rage and frustration I felt constantly churning in my belly. It was possibly the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and I set my sights on getting a guitar and learning to play it, not smash it, for now. So I bugged my mom to buy me a guitar, and then I bugged her some more. When that didn't work, I tried a different strategy. I bugged her some more. Finally, she broke down and bought me a cheap little acoustic guitar. It wasn't the Fender Esquire I'd been hoping for, but it was a start. I took it and a short instructional book my mom had also bought me into the darkness of my room, determined not to come out until I was legitimately bona fided. But I'm the one. I am the one, and I can see that this is me, and I will be, you'll all see, I'm the one. By now you probably know how this story ends, as it's been told 1,000 times before. Young misfit picks up a guitar, learns a few chords, and before you know it, he is transformed. A star is born, and neither his life nor the world are ever the same again. Well, that's how it was supposed to end. In reality, the ending to my story is a little bit different. I didn't quite uncover the musical genius that was hiding deep inside of myself. Instead, I confirmed what my mom already knew and validated her worst fears. The simple and sad fact that I had no intrinsic musical ability at all. None. Zippo. Stubby, little, and inflexible fingers combined with laziness and a short attention span are not the ingredients for mastery of anything, let alone a musical instrument. I remember the book first trying to cover a few simple chords, but that soon grew boring and struck me as the sort of thing a rhythm guitar player would need to know. Screw that, it was lead or nothing for me. So I taught myself a couple of simple one-string melodies and solos, slowly plinking them out as the fingers on my left hand moved from fret to fret, becoming unjustifiably impressed with myself when, for example, I stumbled upon what I took to be the melody for the old folk song, Little Brown Jug. My enthusiasm for playing was exponentially greater than any propensity I had. I say propensity rather than talent due to the rules of mathematics, as using the word talent would have resulted in a divide by zero error. I remember sitting in our living room, torturing my mom with my playing, when I asked her, what should I play next? How about Over the Hills and Far Away? Impressed, I replied, I didn't know you were familiar with the Led Zeppelin song. Led Zeppelin has a song called that? She asked. Yeah, it's on Houses of the Holy, I replied. Oh, she said, I was just saying that you should play Over the Hills and Far Away. Far, far away. Very funny, I said. About this time, I started babysitting on Sunday nights for a family that lived on the street about 3 doors down. The Poisels. One night after the kids had fallen asleep, I called home and asked my little sister to bring over my guitar so I could practice. There, in the quiet of the Poisels' living room, I plunked away for about an hour when Mr. and Mrs. Poisel came home. Mrs. Poisel enthusiastically reacted to the sight of me with my guitar. Do you play? She asked. It was obvious that she loved music. Yeah, I get by, I replied. She pulled up a chair across from where I sat with my guitar, and with a big and happy, anticipatory grin on her face, said, "Play something." "Okay," I said, and delved right into my one-string translation of Little Brown Jug. As I slowly plinked and plunked away, I looked up in time to see the last glimmer of light fade from her face, as her smile transformed into the same pained expression I recognized from my mom's face when she heard the same rendition of the folk classic. I stopped playing and said, "Well, it's getting late," she said, finishing my sentence before adding, "Excuse me." Then she was up and out of the room, leaving Mr. Poisel to pay me and see me off. After he shut the front door behind me, I thought I could hear, buried in the night mix with the crickets, the muffled sound of laughter from inside the Poisel's house, but I couldn't be sure. One evening, about a week later, shortly after supper, my guitar and I were in the living room when I decided it was time to return to my bedroom. As I approached the hallway, my trusty guitar in my right hand, my oldest brother Mike emerged from the bathroom. We met in the hallway, which was a bit too narrow for Mike, me, and my guitar, and as we bumped shoulders, Mike gave me an innocent brotherly push. I lost my balance and my guitar ended up pinned against the wall as my right elbow pierced the guitar's top board, leaving a big hole in it. "You broke my guitar," I protested. Mike mumbled something in return and left the room. I couldn't tell what it was he said, but it clearly didn't include the words, "I'm sorry." Devastated, I stepped into the kitchen where my mom was doing the dishes. "Look," I said, "look what Mike did to my guitar." She barely looked up from the sink and, glancing at the smashed guitar, said, "Oh well." "Oh well? That's it? You're not going to yell at him?" "These things happen sometimes," she said, returning to her dishes. Perplexed, I said, "If I didn't know better, I might think you're glad Mike broke my guitar." She remained silent, her head down, hiding what I could swear was a smile. All right, Dave Gourdoux, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is Greg Dequire. Hello, Greg.
Hello.
Greg, welcome back to the show. We haven't seen you in a while.
Thank you.
Greg Dequire, same last name as me, so he is my brother. Greg, what do you have for us today?
Well, I was always intrigued with the secret history of our country. One of the biggest secret histories is that the U.S. space program is, of course, not the U.S. space program, but an extension of the German space program from World War II. A bunch of odd characters got together in the desert when they come up with the atomic bomb. And of these odd characters, I started reading books and stuff. And these odd characters would, after work, they'd go bowling, play cards, typical type stuff. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that'd be a fun thing to sit on, is to listen to these rocket scientists and ne'er-do-wells have a poker game. So this is the scene that I wrote of these unfortunate people playing poker. I guess the greater point to this story is I thought that there was perhaps an old German feller who is on his deathbed who wants to right his wrongs by telling his story to his grandson. And it turns out he was part of the biggest problems of history of the world. He had his hand on and many evil things, so that he's trying to do well before he passes on by telling these stories to his grandson. And this poker scene is one of these stories. All
right, well, Greg Dequire, take it away.
All right, here we go. So it's titled Poker Party, New Mexico Desert, late 1945-46-ish. Thursday nights were poker nights at the ranch. I always look forward to poker nights. We had the most fun. Even though we all worked together during the day, it felt good to relax and have a drink and enjoy the day's events over open discussion and a good game of poker. Besides, you just never knew who would show up for a hand or two or just watch the fun. Poker was always at Jack's place on the ranch. He had the biggest and best basement, always very cool even during the hot desert days. All of this is sort of Jack's party anyways. We're all just here to make sure it all gets done the right way, and to get it done at all costs before the Russians beat us to it. Vern and I got to Jack's right on time. We always brought the beer. Being German, we didn't trust the Americans would know what really good beer is. We trusted them to bring the pretzels. The usual group was already there. Jack, of course, and his two friends, Al and Elron. Al was an older gentleman, but he spoke German fluently, so we got along just fine. Jack told me Al was into religion in a big way. I never really fully understood it, but he was a very intelligent man, and their mutual friend Elron, he wanted us to call him Big L, or just L, I guess. Jack, Al, and L had all met at a club in Pasadena, California. Jack always invited them to poker night. How they got on the ranch, I never knew. I just figured friends of Jack were cleared to be here. Big L was a writer, and both Al and L were big anti-establishment guys. I think they did drugs, too. I wasn't sure. They never did anything but drink beer in front of me and Vern. Before the game started, we all took our usual seats at the circular green felt poker table. Vern was on my right side, L was on my left. Jack was next to L, and Al was between Jack and Vern. Jack always dealt first. Before the deal, he stated we would have 2 distinguished visitors tonight, with a funny smirk on his face. He didn't say who it would be, just that it would be a surprise. Jack always got a new deck for the game. I think deep down, no one here really trusted anyone. Another of Jack's friends always provided a fresh deck of the game, then the friend would go upstairs to watch the door for us. Jack later told me that the friend with the cards was an FBI agent sent here just to watch us, but Jack kicked him out at game time so we could openly talk at the game. Jack slowly shuffled the cards. He offered Al to cut, but he denied. Jack distributed the cards around the table. 5-card stud, no wilds was his call. Ante up, gents. 10 gets you in. It was always a cash-only game. No problem for us. The U.S. government was paying us lots of money for this job. We had enough to win, lose, or burn. It didn't matter to us. The game was really just for fun. But you really got to know the person by how he played the game and understood how the person thought when the so-called chips were down. We were usually pretty quiet in poker nights, usually just shop talk and such, but tonight we got a good insight on Jack's friends, sort of. Jack looked at his cards and asked around the room, "Okay, opening bets, anyone?" 5, called L. The rest of the room grumbled their agreements. "Okay, who needs cards? L? I'll take 2, please." Jack asked me next. "Heine?" 2 off the top, please, I said. "Vern, what about you?" Vern grumbled. 3, please. "Okay, Al, what about you?" Al said very quietly, "None for me, thanks." The table had a low, "Uh-oh." Al said, "There he goes again." Al rarely ever needed other cards. None of us ever said anything except this time Vern spoke out of frustration from his own, always bad cards. "Damn it, Al, you never need any other cards. What did you do, make a deal with the goddamn devil or something?" I thought Al was gonna blow. Jack laughed till he turned red. Al always won the hand when he refused cards. Al just looked at Vern very sternly, raised an eyebrow, and asked, "Jealous?" "Better the devil you know, eh, Vern?" said Al. We all looked at our cards. Jack went around the room again. "Well, Al, we're waiting." "Fold," said Al. "Okay, Heine, you're next." "I raised 15, I said. Jack barely got out the question for Vern before he blurted out, "Screw this hand." Between giggles, he asked Al next. "I see you're 15 and raised 20. "Damn," Jack said. "So that's 35 to me, huh? Well, it's early yet." I fold. It was down to me and Al. Al said to me, "Why don't you fold? You know I'm going to win." "I haven't even looked at my cards, and I know I got you by the skull and bones." Being a proud German, I didn't back down. "Okay, I raise you 20 more, I said. Al laughed. "Jack, where did you find this crazy crowd? If more acted like him, they may have actually won." The room was filled with laughter. I always wondered who would win a war of nerves, a Nazi or an occult priest. Jack blurted out, "Uh-oh, I said that out loud, didn't I?" Al stood up visibly upset, but then sat down calmly and said, "I'll deal with you at the club back at Pasadena later. Tonight I just want to play cards." Jack looked embarrassed, but we moved on. "Okay, honey, let's see him," Al said. "Full boat, kings over queens," I said. "Let's see you beat that," I teased. Al slowly overturned his cards. 10 of spades, jack of spades, queen of spades, king of spades, and he slowly turned the last card, deuce of spades. "Holy shit, you won, Heine," Jack said. "What happened, Al? You never lose." "When you don't ask or look at your cards." Al said he was testing my nerves in a tight situation. "I just want to see how Heine would react. We haven't really tested him yet." "I'm impressed," Al said. "Why me? I don't understand. What test?" I asked. Jack answered, "Look, we know Vern passed his test in the war, but we didn't know too much about your background. So through these poker games, we see what kind of person you are. Soon this project will be over, or we may still need your services, or we may just need to pick your brain a little, that's all." At the time, the FBI man walked downstairs and told Jack that the 2 guests had arrived. "I'll be right back. Why don't you gents open some drinks? I could use one for sure," Jack said. Vern brought over some beers from the fridge and Jack had in his basement. We all had one. "Good show, Heine," L said. L then looked at Vern. "What test did you pass during the war?" I didn't fold under questioning by the U.S. government when they picked me up. They knew I was an SS officer, but that I was in the scientific division, so they asked what I knew, what we were doing to the Jews, and I said I didn't know. "So you did know?" asked L. "Maybe, maybe not. Jack knows. I didn't tell the U.S. I'm not going to tell you." Al and I laughed at that. Good try, said Al. Jack came back down the stairs with his two guests. I was shocked at who he had with him. Everybody know Rob and Albert? Vern knew them both, but Elle and I knew of them but never met them. We took a quick break from the game while Jack introduced us to his friends. Whenever Albert was in town, we tried to bring him to look at what we're doing here, said Jack. Albert said, this is Heinrich and Elron. Hello, pleasant to meet you both, Albert said. With that, Vern, Robert, Jack, and Albert went to a bar that Jack had in his basement that was close to the refrigerator and talked quietly for a few minutes. Heinrich, why don't you join us for a cigar over here, Robert said. So I went over to what they were discussing. I looked back to see Al and Elle in heated discussion over who was going to run this club of theirs for them when Al decided to leave town. So, Heinrich, why don't you tell Robert and Albert about how we got our formula for the V2 in Germany, Vern said. Well, I was with German intelligence in Berlin for a while, stationed with General Galen. Under him was a man named Orlov. I think he was a Russian double agent, so I followed him for a while and caught him sending coded messages back to Moscow. I confronted him about it. He pleaded with me not to give up. He said that his real enemy was Russian rebels and not the Germans. So I said, what do I get for turning you in and letting you continue your mission? Orlov knew what I was working on, so he offered me some scientific information to help us create a better chemical fuel system for our rockets. I asked how he knew all about this, and he said because he was in Russian intelligence and knew all about it already. Also because they were working on the same thing, but they had an advantage. I asked him what advantage. He said because of what they found in the Russian wilderness in Siberia near Tunguska. He didn't say more about it, but 2 weeks later he gave me a formula translated from Russian that turned out to be the trick. The output and yield of the fuel was exactly what we were looking for. Once I had the results, I gave them to Werner or Vern for further testing. Robert, Albert, and Jack were stunned. So now the grandpa stops. His grandpa's telling a story to this kid. He says, hold on a second, Grandpa. Are you trying to tell me that you were at a poker game with Werner von Braun, L. Ron Hubbard, the Dianetics guy, Aleister Crowley, and Jack Parsons of JPL Laboratories? Then that Robert Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein were all in the same room? So that's too much. A rocket scientist, a Nazi, and 2 occult priests walk into a poker game? Sounds like a goddamn joke. Says, this is why I have to tell my story to you, Logan. Your father would never believe me. Hell, Gramps, I'm not sure I believe you either.
All right, Greg Dequire, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is Troy McDonald. Hello, Troy.
Hello, how are you?
Good, Troy. What do you have for us?
Well, actually, this is a speech that I gave probably 2 or 3 years ago at a Gateway event here, and it was about, obviously, this is the month of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and I kind of faced this dilemma of how do I, because I was not alive during that time, and my friends were not alive during that time, and sometimes their parents now weren't even alive. So how do we keep that message alive for this kind of new generation was kind of what I was grappling with in this speech.
All right, well, very good. Well, Troy McDonald, take it away.
Martin Luther King Jr. is an anomaly, a force, an energy that has lasted for more than half a century. We know about the historic speeches, the phrase, free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. It's ingrained in our memories forever. The March on Washington was historic and changed the way people looked at the civil rights movement. Demonstrations in Selma and Birmingham all will go down as some of the most important events in history. I was fortunate to grow up with a mother who experienced a lot of these moments as they were happening. I asked all the time as a kid, what can I do to make a difference? The answer was always to be myself, respect my heritage, and to do something big. With the greatness of Martin Luther King Jr. established, where does that leave my generation? I call us the social generation. We've only attended integrated schools, and I've never been held back publicly because of my race. I'm the first black president of Kenosha Community Media, the local TV station in town. We've only experienced what our parents or grandparents have gone through via pictures, text, and video. So how can we continue to keep Dr. King's legacy alive for a generation that was not even thought of at the time of his death? I did research for a project last year, and I found that the majority of black students surveyed in a survey I saw in high school and middle school looked at Dr. King Day as a day off. Most already knew the significance of his life, while others didn't care at all. For me, racism is no longer an excuse for being held back, but it's very real. I met my first black friend in high school, and I was one of his first black friends as well. We're still buddies. We didn't connect solely because of race. We both loved pro wrestling, if you smell what The Rock is cooking. Had to add that in there. I personally believe that Dr. King would want his message to evolve and adapt to the changing world, one where marrying interracially is not a crime and gay marriage is now law. A world where we are truly judged based on the content of our character. Those from housing slums can become icons, and those from dirt roads can become heroes. We must not forget, however, the inequality suffered. There are years of struggle and injustice engraved in our DNA and in our ancestors' blood. Our mission should be to honor the struggle and to keep moving forward. We cannot get everyone to care about Dr. King's legacy, not because they don't respect it, but because it hasn't been their existence. Now, of course, media cases and issues will claim that racism is alive and well, and that may be true, but crazy begets crazy. There will always be moments where we doubt if change has occurred, but it has, and it's present every day, at least in my life. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s message is universal. It belongs to everyone now. It has no color, no race, just a spirit and an energy that will not be extinguished. The message of peace is accepted and loved by all. Today, there are people in the world who pay homage to this wonderful hero of our time. People who want to create new memories of Dr. King and award those who refuse to forget. Together, we can keep this message alive by being living examples of what Martin Luther King Jr. would have wanted, to remember the struggle and to stand up when hate mongers and peace detractors try to change what is now deep-rooted in our souls and in law. Let's not rest on our laurels, but continue to innovate and break new ground. This is the most exciting time in history. We have the tools to connect like never before, the ability to become president, write a work of art and paint a masterpiece, to start your own talk show, to love or be loved freely, to serve God or whatever religion you believe with gratitude and exuberance, the ability to change the world. It is all at the very grasp of our fingertips. This social generation, despite many reports, I promise you, they want it so bad. They want to shake the world again and again and again. That is what Dr. King would have wanted. That is a legacy that will live today and forever.
All right, very timely. Troy McDonald, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. All right, and then I'm going to read a piece. This is something new that I've been working on. This is, I guess, kind of a companion piece to what Dave's piece was. I'm working on a memoir now about some of my musical endeavors, mainly going to concerts. All right, the Cannibal Corpse mosh pit at Metal Fest was probably the roughest, most brutal pit I've ever been in, but it was nothing compared to how the Biohazard set about an hour later would make me fear for my life. When the Cannibal Corpse set finished and the lights came up in the Eagles Ballroom in Milwaukee in 1994, I saw the carnage. Bodies doubled over, sweating and panting and high-fiving, plastic cups broke and flattened, puddles of various fluids, some bodily, no doubt, a low, thick haze of smoke, and the stench of sweat and beer, a post-concert war zone. And I only noticed that because, for some reason, the crowd scattered, kind of like roaches. There were 2 acts left for the night, Biohazard, then Slayer, and usually at these shows, when it got this late, the crowd filled in even more the closer it got to the headliners. The air became breathable, and I paused to catch mine. My body ached like it never had after one of these shows. Then I saw my buddy Stuart, who'd made his way up front, rush over and grab my sore arm. "Come on," he grunted, dragging me closer to the stage. About a foot shorter than Stuart, who was basically a keg with legs, piercings, camouflage clothes, and combat boots, I preferred the scrum of the mosh pit, as opposed to the mob rushing the stage, body surfing and vying for front row positions, the constant pushing and shoving. It felt like more work than holding a position up front. Everyone always taller than me, the elbows in the sides and kicks to the head. To me, the mosh pit was organized chaos, and I had room to push and get pushed. But with the crowd temporarily gone, Stuart parked us right in front of the stage, dead center, up against the line of plywood barricades separating us from the stage, a line of burly security guards defending the bands in their makeshift trench. See, I liked Biohazard. They were thrash with a hip-hop side. 2 singers, one who played bass and screamed, the other who rapped and screamed. But I loved Slayer, one of the original thrash metal bands. I'd only seen them at Clash the Titans 3 years ago at Alpine Valley. Great show, but no moshing. I was looking forward to some hardcore mosh action, so being dragged up front like this wasn't part of my plan. But with Stewart there, I probably wouldn't get totally squashed or squeezed to death. The crowd immediately filled in, so I draped my arms over the barricade, the wood digging into my armpits. The lights went out, Biohazard came out, and I instantly got rammed up against that barricade. The wood pressed heart attack-like into my chest, and my feet partially lifted off the ground. Stewart held his ground and used his right arm to sort of create a zone between us so I could breathe, and the guy on my right had his own problems. I couldn't turn my head to see the violence going on behind me, but all sorts of body parts poked and slammed into me. But it was cool. I mean, one of my favorite bands was only a few feet away from me playing that angry heavy metal music that I loved. But a few songs into the set, and this one kid wouldn't go down. Right in front of me, he looked strung out on something, arms whipping about as the guards tried to hold him down to get him out from the trench as he had body surfed himself into. This kid fought hard, and it took the band all of 2 seconds to see this. They stopped playing, and I had a bad feeling about it. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," called out the singer who played bass. "What's going on down there?" That tingling feeling that I'd had now yanked my stomach to my now grounded feet. Something was going to happen. "Let him up," he shouted. "Let him go." The guards stood up and backed off, the kid jumping up and down like he'd won something, and scurried out the side like a rat. "You guys want to come up here?" the singer asked, to which the crowd cheered. Inside, I'm screaming, "No, no, no. Screw these guys. You want to come on up on the stage? Come on up." And he waved an arm, inviting everyone. The guards all looked at each other, shrugged, then leaned back against the stage, arms crossed in a screw this stance. The band started right back up and the bodies pressed harder this time. I knew I was going to die. All right, very good. That is our show for today. So you guys have anything to plug? Books, websites? TJ?
Yeah, my book, Blood is Thicker Than Color, you can get it on Amazon.com. Also, if you'd like to participate in the conversation about the book, I'll be in Lake County, Illinois, February the 10th at Zion Public Library, and I'll also be at North Chicago Public Library on February 13th. So that's February the 10th and February the 13th.
All right, very good. Dave?
My website is Drivel by Dave, DJGourdaux.com.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
Troy?
I was going to promote something like my blog, but I'm actually working on a project, a video project that I'd like to promote, and it's this 18-year-old kid out of California who contacted me and wanted to work on this YouTube show, and it's going to be called River's Diary, and it's coming out in March. So we're just trying to lay the groundwork, but I'm really excited about it. It's going to be huge. It's going to be really, really big, I think.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you very much. And you can find me at cdequire.wordpress.com. All right, this show is a production of the Kenosha Writers Guild. If you have any questions or comments or wish to participate on this program, please visit kenoshaWritersGuild.com and come to one of our meetings. We meet the third Thursday of every month over at Carthage College in the Hedberg Library. Please see the website for more information. Please visit the Facebook and YouTube pages for this show, Speaking of Our Words, and feel free to leave a comment. Thanks to Dave Cole and WGTD, Steve Brown and Nita Hunter, our engineer, Troy McDonald, Lisa Adamowitz-Kless, and the Kenosha Writers Guild. Thank you very much to all of our guests, Richard Bell, Walter Gascoigne, TJ Morris, Dave Gourdoux, Greg Dequire, and Troy McDonald. This is Chris Dequire, and the world needs your stories. We will see you again. Thank you for listening.